Welcome back to the Sound of Loneliness podcast. Today's episode is called Dating Compass Q&A. A reminder to like, follow, and subscribe to the Sound of Loneliness podcast wherever you listen and to our YouTube channel. And if you like what you hear, feel free to give us a 5-star rating. This will grow our capacity to continue to offer you more of what you would like to listen to.
Yes.
So I wanted to start first by sharing a little bit with our listeners about the different umbrellas that our episodes are going to fall under. So we are going to have one umbrella of episodes that are going to be stories of grit and grace. So we will be sitting with guests. So these will be colleagues, friends, family members, and sometimes us. We'll be the voices as well, and we'll be listening to stories. So whatever these people are willing to share with the world about their lives. And we're sharing these stories because you never really know someone's story and their hidden chapters. Even people that we know really, really well. I mean, even you, there's things that I don't know about you until I ask, right? And I think we need to make space intentionally to connect and listen and share. So one umbrella of episodes are going to be these stories of grit and grace. Another umbrella is going to be reflective, informative episodes where we talk about topics of interest. So we've done some of that already. This is where we're going to take some of our experiences as women, as humans, as therapists, and we're going to incorporate our learning and share it with our listeners. And the third umbrella of episodes is going to be what we're doing today. So we are starting a series of Q&A episodes. So this one is called Dating Compass Q&A. So we're going to have a look at some of the questions that we have often been asked by clients, some questions that we've asked ourselves over the years about dating, although I suppose for you it's been a while since you've been dating.
Only 20 years.
Only 20 years. And questions about our readiness to get into a relationship and our capacity to grow and change within a relationship. So some of those questions are what we're going to look at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were kind of talking about what this theme would be, I think both of us were thinking about the idea that it's helpful to reflect within before we start to look outside of ourselves. And so we started to come up with a list of questions that were most commonly asked by clients, things that just seem to come up again and again. And so the question that I think both you and I said first was, do I need to love myself before I can love someone else? And so, Amanda, I'm going to throw that to you first so that we can start to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a question that it's a good one to answer here. I don't want to say it's a good question because it's not my favorite question. It makes me feel sad when people ask it. I've asked it for sure myself because I think it's sort of based on a myth that we have to figure out how to be whole and healed and love ourselves, you know, so well and so perfectly before we are allowed to love someone else, get into a relationship. And I think inherently within that myth, there's some damage where we're sort of saying that if you have wounds, which by the way, we all do, if you have wounds and you're not a perfect person, if you weren't loved really well as a child or in your past relationships, that you don't have the capacity to love someone else. And I just don't think that's true. I do think that the more that we learn how to have grace for ourselves and to love all of the corners of ourselves, all of our chapters, the more that we're capable of doing that, the more we can do that for other people as well. I do think that. So I think, sure, the healthier we are and the more that we learn how to love ourselves, it helps us in our relationships and it helps us love other people. But I don't think that that's a prerequisite to being in love with someone else. Right? So
it's not a requirement.
I don't think so. I really don't.
I
think if we go back to, so here's where my mind goes when I think about this is, well, how did we learn how to love? And ideally, we learn what love is and how to love someone based on how we were loved. So someone else had to love us first if we go way back to infancy, right? Ideally, we have a caregiver or caregivers who wanted us, ideally, and displayed that love for us, that attachment to us, on a regular basis. And so we felt loved and wanted and cared for. So we were loved first, and that taught us what and how we are to love. And then we're able to go and love other people. So we are not the ones that start out by loving ourselves. Babies don't love themselves. I mean, mind you.
They're a little obsessed with themselves. But
yeah, they usually have a pretty good self-image.
Self-esteem, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, unless we wreck it for them.
Yes.
We don't get in the way. I think they start out like, sure, what's wrong with me? But they also don't have a sense of self until we help give that to them by reflecting it back to them, right? They learn who they are by how we see them.
Yes.
Right? So they don't, pop out loving themselves. They need to be loved. They need to be seen. They need to be nurtured. And then that's how they learn how to love and see others and nurture other people.
It gives us our baseline.
Gives us our baseline. That's right. I think that's part of how I answered in my head is, well, how did we learn what love was? And weren't we loved first rather than I had to love myself first? Somebody loved me first. And then I think the other thing is a lot of our wounds that we need to heal from happened in relationships. So whether it was relationships with our primary caregivers or it's attachment wounds in our relationships as we get older. And one of the best ways to heal relationship wounds and attachment wounds is in a relationship, ironically. Right?
I love that you say that relationships can be a place of pain and a place of healing.
Yes.
I've heard you say that quite a lot. And I think that's so much truth in that. And it's such a powerful statement because I think a lot of us can think back to the places where we've been hurt or we've been wounded, and we might overlook the ways in which relationships have created healing, and not just romantically, with friends, with peers, even, teachers, mentors. There's so many ways and places that we can receive love. So if we can embrace the idea that this is actually the most ideal, beautiful place to heal these things, lean into that. That's so powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, there are some even theoretical couples therapy approaches that really look at why are we attracted to the people that we're attracted to, and looking at why do we get into relationships with particular people versus someone else? Why do I like this person and not this person? Why did I get drawn to this person versus this person? And so one of the main couples theories that we really like is imago. And imago talks about having an imago match, right? And that is, I mean, we're really sort of paring it down here, but it's finding someone subconsciously that you're attracted to. There's not a lot of thinking that goes on here at this stage. It's just attraction. And that person tends to be at the same stage of development and growth in their wounds, in their relationships as you are. And you don't even realize it. But they also tend to have adaptations to their wounds and coping mechanisms that are often opposite to yours. I remember asking my therapist about that a long time ago, going like, why would I do this to myself? Why would I find someone who adapts to their wound in the opposite way that I do? Because it seems like we're just hurting each other. Well, am I torturing myself here? Is this nature's way of getting us to torture ourselves further? So I have an attachment wound from childhood, and then I go and I meet a partner that has attachment wounds from childhood, but the way that he plays it out just triggers my attachment wounds. What the heck? This is awful. I remember saying this, looking at my therapist like, this just doesn't seem like a good idea. And he said to me, it could be that this is nature's way of getting us to face again similar scenarios so that we have a second chance to heal the wound, because we can't go back in time to our childhood. We can't go back and, get our parents to do something differently, right? So we can try and do that healing and that growth with this partner who is so perfectly primed to trigger and push all our buttons. Because if they learn to grow and change, and if I learn to grow and change and not trigger my partner, imagine the healing that I can provide for my partner. If I know, wow, this is the thing that triggers him, this is the thing that hurts him, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually take extra care to do the opposite, to make sure that he feels secure and safe with me and knows that he's loved by me. If I go out of my way to do that, how nurturing and loving and caring is that, and how healing is that, right? But it's more healing because I actually have the capacity to do the very wounding that he grew up with. And I'm not going to, because I'm going to learn how not to do that and how to do something else.
So instead of it being torture, it's an opportunity.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, instead of it being scary and something to avoid, right? I shouldn't get into a relationship because I have all these wounds, right? People say that too. Like, am I too broken to be in a relationship?
Yeah, that one breaks my heart. It
Yes.
really does.
Yeah. I mean, we all have some broken pieces, right? And that's okay. I think it becomes not okay when we try to pretend we don't have broken pieces, when we try to hide the broken pieces, when we try to jam ourselves into connection with someone else where our pieces don't fit and we actually break their pieces and our pieces even further in the process. That's not okay. But having the wounds in the first place is part of being human.
It is. And I think it's about bringing it into awareness, bringing it into consciousness, because it'll be more easily perpetuated if, like you said, we're trying to hide it away, we're trying to avoid it, we're trying to mask it.
Yeah.
But if we're able to really look at it, which is terrifying and it's not easy, but if we're able to do that part of the work and see it for what it is and not be so scared of it, then the opportunity for growth can come.
Yeah.
So I think that's the really important piece, is bring it into consciousness, because like you were basically saying, a lot of who we're drawn to is dictated by the unconscious, but we're not doomed to repeat it if we can bring it into awareness.
Yes. Yes. If
Right?
we're willing to bring it into awareness, and then we have to have the tools to do that. We need the help to do that because it's not intuitive, right? If anything, it's like, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to feel that. We have to learn to be humble enough to go, no, like I do need to look at something here, right? Something's not going well here for me in my relationships. I'm repeating a pattern. What's happening here? I need to look at this so I can do something differently. I need to understand, right?
Yes. So I think in essence, what we're saying is it's the combination of doing that individual work, having the courage, the vulnerability to look at that, and then also doing the work with the person that you've decided to commit to.
Yeah.
And that combination means that despite the wounds, we can move forward and we can do healing and we can find the love that we deserve, the love that we desire.
Maybe it's even because of the wounds that we can move
I like that.
forward.
Because, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also, being able to look at someone, the whole picture of them, and instead of saying like, it makes it impossible for me to be stagnant. Your wounds ask me to grow. And then I have a choice. Am I going to answer the call or not? Am I going to grow? Am I going to change? Am I going to learn while I love you? Right? Which, of course, then makes me wonder about the concept of love, because we're saying the word a lot.
Right. So then what does it actually mean? One thing that I thought about was the fact that we often talk about love as a noun.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to shift that into recognizing that love is a verb. It's actually an action. So, we were reflecting on this a little bit in our Hungry Hearts episode when we were talking about all of the ways to show love, to act love, to connect. So things like bids for connection, responding to those bids, filling up our emotional bank accounts, filling up that currency by responding to the bids, by speaking each other's love languages. It's all about the action.
Yeah, the doing, right? The verb.
The doing.
Yes. There is a psychiatrist who talks about love as an action, as the verb. and says that love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. Will also implies a choice. So we do not have to love, we choose to love. And since the choice must be made to nurture growth, then this definition is going to counter the assumption that we love instinctually. So I think perhaps there are some types of love that are instinctual.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of people will say, that they love their children by instinct. They can't not love them. People will say that. But I think they're still talking about feeling there, not necessarily the acts of love, right? We still have to intend to act in love, right? We have a choice, and then we have to choose love. Love is as love does, right? So it's an intention, it's a choice, it's a behavior. I think, again, like as humans, we learn so much from modeling. So if someone acts lovingly toward us, doesn't that teach us how to act lovingly toward them? Right? So do you have to be like heal and whole? No, but it's pretty hard to know how to love someone if you hate yourself.
Yes.
Right? So I think there's a spectrum here, right? I can know how to do love the action, and I can have trouble relating it to myself because I don't feel very good about myself, or maybe the last relationship I was in kind of did a number on my heart. And so it's really hard to be kind to myself and loving towards myself right now. And I mean, I would really want that person to learn over time to go back to being kind and loving towards themselves, or perhaps doing it for the first time. But I think sometimes people learn how to be kind and loving to themselves because they get into a relationship with someone who's treating them with compassion and love, the action.
And I think in that case, then what we're saying is it does require a degree of openness, right? A degree of opening the heart up to be able to receive that, even if it doesn't feel completely comfortable.
Yes.
Which a lot of times it's not going to, even if it feels a bit scary. If we can lean into that risk a little bit.
Yes.
And be open enough to receive even just a little bit, I think that gives us the ability to start to move the needle and make those shifts.
So maybe that's the question that we need to ask ourselves, is not, can I love someone else before I love myself, but am I open to receiving love? Am I open to letting someone in so they see all of me, all of my chapters, not just the ones that I'm willing to share, right? And the level of willingness will determine, I think, our readiness and the depth of loving relationship that we then find.
I think that's a nice way to summarize that. Maybe it's the self-reflection on how open am I right now? And also give yourself grace if you're not. If you just came out of something that felt quite wounding or makes you take a step back, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Maybe just meet you where you are and say, I'm not open right now. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And then when you are ready to receive that, that's when you can take that next step.
Which is like such a good segue into this next question that we get asked, which is, do I have to be fully healed in order to start dating again? And I certainly asked myself that question several times in my life, but definitely in, the most recent segment of my life after my divorce. Do I need to be fully healed in order to start dating again? And I was asking it also from a place of like, I'm a mom with 2 kids and I don't want to create hurt for other people while I'm trying to figure things out, right? So I had to kind of figure out, like, how do I know when I'm ready? And so some of the things that I asked myself were, well, what didn't go well in that relationship? What did? What went right? And when I ask those questions, I don't kind of just look at the other person, like, what did they do wrong? How did they wrong me? Right. And I mean, as much as I like to make jokes, it's not really, what I've learned from this is never to get into a relationship with someone like that. No, that's not helpful. Right.
No.
I need to look at myself when I'm looking at what didn't go well there, how did I contribute to that? And therefore, what is my area for growth? What have I learned? What do I still need to learn? What do I still want to work on and change so that I don't repeat it? Because, whenever we have clients that are asking us, should we stay together or break up?
Yes.
One of the things that I at least think, if I don't always say it, is, you can do your work with this person or the next person. So you kind of have to make a choice about, do you want to do that work with this person that you're already with, that you've made, a connection with, that you have some history with, perhaps have lots of history, roots of family. Do you want to do the work and the growth with them, or do you want to do it with the next person? Because you're going to have to do it. Right. Yeah. And so that's, I think, what I was trying to do, in this most recent chunk of my life where I started dating again, was I looked at, I don't really want to relive the mistakes that I've done in my previous relationships if I can help it, which means I have to look back and figure out how to not repeat it. Otherwise, I'm going to do the same work again with a new person, right? Which means not really getting much further. So I'd like to figure that out first and then hopefully not repeat the same story. Right.
Yeah. So you really led with accountability.
Yes.
Which is not easy.
No.
I'm wondering, what allowed you to do that, to really look inwards in the way that you did? Because like you said, it's so easy to point the finger. It's so easy to bash or to blame. And for you to make a conscious decision to say, no, I'm going to really look at me and I'm going to lean into this accountability piece. How did you do that?
Well, as much as it sounds like it's easier to blame someone else, I don't think it actually is, because I can't control them at all.
Yeah.
I have no control over the other person's actions. I can look back and I can feel really sad and miserable or angry about things that they did, but I can't change any of that. But I can look back at my part, and I do have control over me, my behavior, my actions. And I can't undo my actions back then, but I can certainly go, why did I respond that way then, or react that way then? And I would like to not do that next time. Yeah. So I don't want to relive this. So for me, there's a huge motivator there. I don't want to relive the pain. So in order to do that, I then have to go, okay, what do I have to work on and change? There's a lot to be said for humility. It seems to be something that's hard to develop. We need lots of tough experiences and be kind of shoved down a few times before we're like, okay, I need to grow my humility. But once you do, and you start getting into the habit of looking at, how did I contribute to the problem here? What can I do differently? It actually feels a lot better than just pointing the finger outward, than just blaming. My therapist used to tell me that if you're pointing the finger outward, there's one finger pointed at the other person. And if you look at your hand, there's 3 fingers pointed back at you. And I was like, oh, you're so smart. He was so smart. I'm so sad he retired. He's so smart. Such sage advice all the time. Just little things like that stuck with me so deeply is, I have to look at what was my role, because I can control my role. I can change it. I can change my future story, even if I can't undo the past.
What's really cool about that then is it actually sounds like by being accountable, you felt empowered.
Yes,
right?
For sure.
Because then you're not stuck in cycles that you don't want to be stuck in. So you actually gave yourself a sense of agency.
Yes.
By reflecting and being accountable and humbling yourself in that way. So I just think that's super cool to think of it in that way. It's that's actually a way to empower yourself moving forward.
Yes. And let me be clear that as much as I had the intention of understanding What didn't go well? How did I contribute to the problem? I don't want to repeat the pattern. As much as I had the intention to do that, and I did try and do some work there, I still had lots of blind spots until I got into a long-term relationship. And then, gosh, is it such a good magnifier, right? It's such a good opportunity for me to then, again, exercise that muscle of humility when we get into arguments, disagreements, impasses at things. When I become reactive and I don't like how I'm behaving or what I'm saying or doing, I needed to be in a relationship to continue the growth and the work, because I could only do so much by myself. But then I had to see myself in a relationship again, anew, and see, oh, geez, I don't like what I'm doing there. Oh, there's a pattern. Oh, no. I don't want to slip down that road. Why is that happening? Right? Or what's getting triggered here for me? And how much of this is really my partner's problem and how much of it is me? Right? How much of it is the story I'm telling myself about what's going on here versus, oh no, he said this or he did this, or it's often not really that much him. It's often a lot me. And
it's the 90-10 rule, right? 90%
Totally.
of interactions are about our stuff and 10% really is about what's being said to us.
Oh my goodness. It's so true. That 90-10 rule is so brilliant and so true. And if you didn't have humility, sometimes you're just forced to, because you have to sit down and go, oh my goodness, that was me. Or, I thought I had healed that piece. Nope.
Isn't that the worst?
Oh, it's the worst. It's the worst. Where you're like,
that happens to me all the time.
I worked on that one. No, you didn't.
I've done that.
Well, you did. But it's like onions, right? It's layers.
Yeah.
And so you did some growth. You did some healing there. And when you get into a relationship with someone, talk about taking off layers.
Yeah.
So now it's like, more growth, more learning. But to me, it's an incredible opportunity, because why wouldn't I want to get better with this stuff? Why wouldn't I want my next relationship to be the best one I ever have? Why wouldn't I want it to be really my last one, please? I know.
The universe hears you.
That's right. Yeah. Like, hello, universe. Yeah. No, I am open to doing the work with this man. I don't need to try and do the work with someone else. I'm good. And I am very, very lucky, because I am with someone now who is willing to do that growth with me and who has these amazing conversations with me about these things, and is very willing as well to stop and look at, well, how did I contribute to that? So we can both do that. How did I contribute to this? What can we do differently? We're not always great at it, but we can do that. And if I'm with someone who can do that with me, then thanks. I'm going to stay right here and I'm going to do this work. I'm good. Yeah. I'm going to do this work.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing your personal experience and what it's been like to go through that with you, how you've answered this question, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that'll be really helpful to a lot of our listeners. I wonder if this is a good time to take a break, and on the other side, we'll answer some more of these commonly asked questions.
Good. Awesome. See you in a few.
Okay, welcome back. So we just spent some time reflecting on, if we're ready to get into a relationship and the work that might be involved and the healing that can come from relationships. So that again leads us to another question that we're asked really often, and it's a hard one to answer. How do I know who's the right person for me?
Right. How do I choose?
Start?
Yes. Yeah. I've had people ask me, like, what are the things I should look for if I'm looking to date? What are the qualities that I should look for? And then how do I know that this person is right for me? And I mean, there's so many things that you can answer with, but I think the very first thing that comes to my mind is kind of like what I was alluding to, or what I was just saying right before the break, which is relationships are full of intentional attending to the history that we've come with and the growth and the learning that we then need to do. Mm-hmm. Can you find someone who's willing to do that survey with you, right? Survey the landscape of both of your histories and look at the damage of where you are now, right? And then move forward with you and go, okay, So let's learn about each other. Let's learn about ourselves. Let's learn about each other together. And let's grow together. And let's do this healing together, which, means sometimes it's going to be painful. But do you have someone who actually is willing, for example, to go to therapy with you? If things are if you're hitting a wall where you don't know what to do and you need some more skills and you need some help, are you with someone who's like, yeah, like, of course, let's go. If that's where you get to, right? Are you with someone who is willing to sit down and talk to you about their pain or about the way that you might be triggering them or the thing that you did yesterday that really upset them? Can they sit down and talk with you about it? And can you together intentionally attend to your relationship? And if you can, I feel like you have done a huge part of the work in terms of trying to find a good person to connect with long term. I think the other things that I ask people is, well, do you know your attachment style? Do you know this potential person's attachment style? How do those fit? Do you know your love language or your primary love languages? And do you know those of your potential person here? Do you know how those might fit? Do you know what you envision for your future? And do you know what this person is thinking about in terms of their future? And do those things fit? Right? That's kind of a values discussion along with a vision discussion. Can you look at those things, and do you know enough about yourself to be able to answer those questions? Are you in a relationship with someone where you can have those conversations? And then probably you're on a good path. Probably.
Yeah. And I think about what be required to have those types of conversations, because again, that's not easy work. They're not easy questions. So I think about trust. I think about the foundation of going to those places so that you're able to create the safety to be vulnerable, to go there.
Yes.
Right? And so the person I think of when it comes to trust, the person that I think really depicts trust best would be our lovely Brene Brown, who we always look to for her wonderful wisdom and guidance. And Brene Brown has this really great acronym that kind of spells out the different qualities or components of trust. And I share this with clients all the time, and I really have embraced this in my own life as well. And it's braving trust. So I'll just quickly walk you through what each letter stands for in the acronym and what it really means. And I think, again, this could be something to look for. Can you find these qualities? Do you see these features in this other person? And if you do, this could be an indication that this is somebody who I could have this trust with, who knows what trust means, and therefore somebody who could go to these places with me. So the first one, the B, stands for boundaries, which is like that B word I think we use constantly as therapists, right? It's one of our favorite words. So boundaries is really understanding that boundaries are healthy. Is this somebody that has good internal boundaries, somebody that can respect other people's boundaries? Then there's the reliability. So R stands for reliability. Can you consistently count on this person to show up for you? I think that's so important in all relationships. Then there's the accountability, which we just spent some time talking to you about, the importance of accountability, of having ownership, of reflecting on the parts that we play in situations and having the humility to do that. So V stands for vault. And I think this makes both of us think about the concept of the couple bubble, which, Amanda, if you could share with our listeners what this lovely idea is.
Yeah, so the couple bubble, I believe, is a concept developed by Stan Tatkin, another couples therapist, researcher, fantastic human out there. And he talks about how it's really important that couples have a bubble around them that includes just the two of them. And it's where their most intimate everything resides. And it's not a bubble that people get to enter. Nobody else comes in here, right? Because this is between you and me. So there's going to be secrets that I know about my partner that nobody else knows, and vice versa, right? He's going to be the only one that knows certain things about who I am or some things I've been through or about how something affects me. And it's not something he's then going to go and tell his mom about, right? I mean, there's some things that we totally fine, but he would know what I'd be fine with being shared about me and what I would not want shared, right? He would know the difference there. And because he respects the couple bubble, then what goes into that vault stays right there. So it's like protection and security for the two of us, right? And it also plays into that, goes back to B with boundaries, right? Of, you know, making sure that we know who is supposed to be inside or outside of our couple bubble. I think the vault too is, you know, about keeping privacy and secrecy in your relationship, right? But not keeping secrets from each other.
Yes.
Right? So we can be a vault in terms of the safety that we provide for our partner as a way of keeping our relationship very, very safe.
Right. Right. So before you're in the relationship and before you've maybe formed that couple bubble and you're on the dating scene and you're kind of exploring potential partners, you could think about how this person talks about their friends, things that they disclose or don't disclose, things that they choose to share as a bit of an indication for how they think about this vault and how they depict this. That moves us to I, integrity. So this is really about, you know, honesty. Is this a person with a strong moral compass? N stands for non-judgment. And I think that's not just judgment in terms of others, but also in terms of themselves. How does this person talk about themselves? Is it with a lot of judgment or is it with a lot of compassion, a lot of grace? That can give you some insight. And the last part of the acronym is generosity. And I think you talked about this a little bit in our Hungry Hearts episode, that the way that we show up and are generous in relationships can be so expansive. It's generosity with time, with resources, with creativity, with thoughts. There's just so many numerous ways to be generous. So again, if we can use this acronym as a bit of a guide to figure out the type of person that we can establish trust with, if we can then do that, I think that leads us to a place where we can have the vulnerability to have those deeper conversations.
Yes. So let's say that we have looked at the variables for helping us to decide whether we are in a place that we'd like to decide to be in a relationship with someone. Let's say that we have someone that we have started a relationship with and we are growing in that relationship as well. The other types of questions we tend to get about dating and about relationships and stages of relationships have to do with the pace of the relationship. So we get questions like, when should we move in together? When should we get married? Should we get married? When should we have kids? Do we want kids? Those are the kinds of questions that I tend to hear sort of about, well, what's next, right? So now I'm with this person and where do our steps go from here?
These are the big ones. These are the ones that kind of stop me in my tracks because as therapists, we're not there to give advice, right?
No, which I think lots of people don't know that.
Yeah.
It's not our job is to give advice.
Not our job.
No.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can help people to try and find answers to their own questions. And sometimes the best way to do that is we ask them more questions.
Which can be, I'm sure, rather annoying.
It's a very stereotypical thing, right? It's the therapist answering the question with a question. But the idea behind it, even though it's comical, is to teach you to look further yourself, to look further inward, to ask yourself these things so that you can do that inquiry eventually yourself, right? So if I'm asking the question, for example, when should we get married or should we get married? I asked you this question. I said to Kiara, hey, you're married. Here's something I don't know about you. Why are you married? And I'm asking that question because technically, like, the way that things are now, you don't have to get married to have access to most things legally that married people have. So if you're living together for a certain period of time, you're considered common law. If you have a child together, there's some sort of stipulations that once they're in place, you're pretty much treated like a married couple. But you're married. You're wearing rings. You had a wedding.
Yes.
Right? And you got married when you were what, like 26 or something?
26.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is also a little bit outside the norm now for the way that culture's going, where people are waiting longer and longer if they get married. But some people just don't even consider it anymore. So that was my question to you is, well, why did you get married?
And you know what's really surprising, or I guess it surprised me, is it kind of stumped me because I had to be like, okay, let me think about this. The obvious answer is, we loved each other. We felt like a really strong, healthy, beautiful relationship. We're a bit odd. We're high school sweethearts. So we started dating at 16, and by 18, we went to the same university. So we actually lived in the same student house with others as well. But we essentially started living together at 18. So that's a little bit, that's different as well. So I think at the time, in my mind, that was just the natural next step. And I thought about my 25-year-old, 26-year-old brain. Why did she want to get married? Okay, so she loves this guy. It's going well. Great. But I think part of it was this idea of legitimizing our relationship. And as a 35-year-old, I can see that that's flawed thinking. But back then, it really felt important. For whatever reason, it felt like I need the world to recognize that this is real. And why? Like, why did I care so much about that? Because when I think about our family and our friends who kind of grew up watching us together, they didn't question if our relationship was legitimate. They knew how serious and committed we were, but there was this maybe societal pressure that I had internalized without realizing it, that had to be what happened next. So at the surface, I think there was that pressure. Now, if I go deeper as a 35-year-old, the answer is different, right? And now I've done 9 years of therapy. So I'd like to think I'm more evolved. I'd like to think I'm more self-aware. Now I think the actual answer is a desire to create what I didn't have, right? So came from a divorced family. I didn't see the stability that I would have liked. And I think if I even broaden that more, I think a lot of the relationships that I was exposed to, my perception, there was a lot of unhealthy ones. So I think deep down, there was this strong desire to do it differently. And I'm a very determined person, which you might have learned over these years.
No.
And I think I had this like strong, deep sense of determination to create what I didn't see and to be like, no, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the thing that I didn't see but really want. And so that's my more evolved, reflective adult answer, if that makes sense.
So interesting, because I think I've seen that with other people too, who've come from families where maybe the parents were never married or they didn't stay married. And so then they want to create the thing that they wanted as a child or the thing they felt they lost if they'd had it. There's also the flip side too, because like my parents are still married
yeah,
and like love each other. I always say that part because there's a lot of people who stay married who don't even like each other. So I have to say for the record, my parents love each other, like each other. They're still married. And I don't actually know how many years it's been. It's been a lot of years, 40, 50 years. It's been a long time that my parents have been together. And perhaps because getting married is important to me too. I've been married.
Yes.
And the reason that relationship didn't work out had nothing to do with us being married. So it's not some bad omen for me that's then turned me off of ever being married. I think I want what my parents have. And so it's interesting, right? People can want to get married to make what they didn't have. And some people can want to get married to make it again, right? Recreate the story that they had in their childhood as a child. And I do believe that people can love each other that long and forever. And I know that not everybody believes that or feels that way. But for me, that is something that I feel. And there is something to me about the public declaration of being married, not a wedding. You don't have to have a wedding to do it. But, you know, people check ring fingers for a reason. There is a public declaration in wearing a ring on your finger that says, there is someone out there that I love. There is someone out there that I intend to love action-wise for my whole life. Yeah. That's what the ring says to me. So that means something to me. That does, I don't know, that does something else, something more for me in my mind. And it's something that, yeah, I would like to have again. If people ask me, well, when should we get married? How long is, long enough to date before we get engaged? And I often ask, well, I wonder why these people are looking outside to ask these questions instead of looking inside their couple bubble to figure out the answer to these, because I think it's so personal. I think some people can get married after months of being together and stay married forever. And some people can get married after years of being together and then get divorced right away.
Right. And so I wonder for you, how have you determined pace in your relationships? Has it looked different in different relationships?
Yeah, it's looked different in different relationships, but I think in the past I have historically behaved a little bit more like someone does when they have an anxious attachment style and therefore want the security that they think marriage will bring them. So the pace moves faster in your mind when you're like, oh, but I just need to feel safe. So if we're married, then I'll feel safer. And that's like totally an illusion, right? Because obviously people get divorced.
Yes.
And also people stay unhappily married. So that doesn't do anything. It's just that us anxiously attached folks do what we can to allay our anxiety about abandonment.
Right.
So there's that. Now I really look at my family. I look at my children. I look at the life that I'm living and the life that my partner is living. And we decide together. We have conversations and we decide together about what is going to be best for us. And we both want the same thing. I am a bit traditional. I wouldn't ask him to marry me. I'm traditional. I'm old fashioned. So he knows that I want to get married. I know that he wants to marry me. So then now the pace is just about what works for our families and what works in his mind.
Right. So, I mean, based on that answer, if I were to apply even some theory to that, it makes me think about Gottman's idea of shared vision.
Yeah.
And really reflecting with that person on what do we see for our life together?
Yes.
And if you can create shared meaning and have a shared vision, I think then that can dictate the pace.
Yes, it can. And I think that the feeling collaborative in your relationship is so important. Feeling like you're allowed to talk about things, that your needs and your wants, even if you can't explain why you need or want something, that it's still heard and validated by your significant other is so important. We need to be able to do that for each other. So I think, like looking at big conversations of moving in together, getting married, having children, those are the kinds of things that people need to be able to talk to each other about. And surprisingly, there are couples who don't talk about these things, get married and don't even know that one person didn't want to have children. Right. Yeah. And so I think really, really important that you learn how to have difficult conversations, learn how to be uncomfortable in some of those conversations, because it's still better to be uncomfortable and have the conversation and know the answers than to not have the conversations because you're afraid of what the answer might be.
Yes. And have them earlier.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you have them earlier and you can see, it reveals so much about the other person.
Yes.
It reveals everything.
It does. But that means that we have to be okay with, we have to know ourselves. We have to be okay with who we are so that we can answer those questions and have those conversations early, right? Where we can say, because I knew, when I got into dating this time around in my life, I knew that I wanted to get married. And I didn't make that a secret. It wasn't something I talked about on like the first date or anything with people. But I also wasn't like, yeah, well, whatever. Like, I'll just do whatever. If I say that, right, that's because I'm trying to come off as someone who has no expectations and isn't very high maintenance. And, whatever you need, I can bend and pretzel to fit, right?
Yeah.
And that's old me, right? And that means you're going to get exactly what you're asking for there. So you'll get someone who really does not care about your needs and will really require you to pretzel yourself. and
Right.
also isn't quite sure who you are because you're not quite sure who you are.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So not a good recipe, right? And sometimes, again, us anxiously attached folks really prefer to be in relationships. So we can make those kinds of errors where we're like, well, I'm just going to deny who I am, right? And what I need to feel secure and happy and stable. And I'm not going to tell you exactly who I am or show you who I am, because what if you don't like it?
Yeah.
Because I just need you, right?
Yeah.
The needing, right? And so, I mean, this is where whenever we do an episode on attachment theory, we'll talk more about it. But attachment theory is on such a spectrum. And I think at different stages of my life, I was further on the anxiously attached portion. And I think over time, I've definitely moved into a secure attachment space where I'm like, well, listen, I would prefer to not do the rest of my life without a partner. I'd like a partner in my life. But that partner's really going to have to be someone that I fit with. And that means that they need to know who I am. I can't hide who I am. And that means I need to know who I am. And it means that I need to know what I'm looking for. And it means that I need to be okay with sharing those things, who I am, what I'm looking for. And then I can see whether this person in front of me is a good fit. Right. And then I will attract the person that is the right fit. And does that mean risking being alone? Sure. I got to tell you, I would take being alone any day over being lonely in a relationship. Any day, because I've had it both ways. And I would take being alone any day over being lonely in a relationship. Thankfully, I'm not lonely in my relationship now. But I have been in the past in previous relationships, and it is not a nice place to be. And I am now at a space in my life where I knew going into this new phase of my life, if I couldn't find someone that I fit well with, that I would be okay. I wouldn't have chosen that. And yet, if that's kind of what the script is in the universe for me, then I would have accepted it. Thankfully, that doesn't seem to be the way it's going. And I'm thankful for that, because I really would prefer to do my life as a pair. I think most of us choose to go through life in pairs. It's why we have such a big industry around dating and love and all of these things, right? And it's why there's books about attachment and learning about ourselves and growth. And because it's okay to want to be in a relationship. It's okay to want to date after you've had your heart broken. That's okay. Right? So I think that's one of the takeaways from today's episode is like, wanting that doesn't make you pathetic and it doesn't make you desperate. It makes you human that you perhaps want a relationship.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because I feel like I can give a bit of a platform to the folks on the more avoidant side of the spectrum. And I think there's a lot of similarities. So when I started dating, as a teenager, there was a lot more of that avoidance stuff that I had come up for me. And I would also deny myself and my needs, but not in a way that I pretzeled, in a way that I would act completely indifferent to the other person. I don't need you. I don't really care what you want. I don't really care about you that much. And I don't really want commitment. There was so much mind games, playing games, not that I was conscious of it, but to be vulnerable with another person, to accept that I had needs and to express them felt like such a weakness and so scary. So deep down, all I wanted was to pair with somebody and to feel safe with them. But to even admit that to myself was so utterly terrifying. So I can definitely relate to the idea of denying yourself and showing something very different because of the fear of what would happen if you revealed your inner self. And so thank God I paired with someone who just kind of was like, okay, let's do this. And just stood next to me and just let me do my thing and never really back down. He gave me my space to do my growth, and I was able to do it with him. And luckily I've gotten to a place where I've found myself feeling secure. But I really can relate to your story just from the other side of that continuum, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, I really love actually that we're opposites here. I also think it's really interesting. It speaks to when you tether yourself to someone who's more securely attached.
Yes.
And they have that like grounding force, that sort of anchoring, right? How it can bring you over. It can just like if you, I mean, if me as an anxiously attached child, right? And then teenager, if I attached myself to someone who was avoidant, I would become more anxious, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why it's helpful to understand bits about ourselves so that we can know, well, what would be a healthier tether for me, right?
Yeah.
If I found someone who was this steadying force in my life and who didn't go anywhere, right? It was just like, no, like, okay, I can see that you're freaking out and I'm just here. I'm here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
They're like the redwood trees.
Yes.
Right? Big, strong, tall.
Rooted.
Right? They might move a little in the wind, like their branches might, but I mean, they will not be moved from their spot. They are grounded. They are rooted.
Absolutely.
And when you nest in that branch of that tree, you can feel the grounding just coursing through you. Right?
That in itself is so healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great takeaway. What should you do? Go find yourself a redwood tree.
That's our relationship advice. Find a tree.
Find a tree.
Easy.
Honestly, I mean, I can find a million ways to use a tree as a good metaphor. I can't find any bad ones. I swear. They're just lovely creations. And I'm so thankful for them. Thank you, trees. Thank you, trees.
We're sponsored by trees.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
Yes, by the redwood forests that I haven't seen yet. And I'm going to go and see them because I gotta hug one of those trees. I have to.
100%.
And then I will send you a picture of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, go and find yourself a sturdy tree, but also try and root yourself, right?
Yeah.
Try and be one of those trees yourself, right? You're much more likely to do that if you can weave your roots underground with another sturdy tree, right? Because they tether together and they get nice and strong and grounded and held, right? To the earth together through each other. And they can weather storms a heck of a lot better that way. So if you're looking to date or you're in a relationship, remember that love is an action, right? Love is as love does. It takes intention. And we can always learn how to love, and we can always learn how to love better. And the more introspection that we do, the better we can be for ourselves and for our relationships, right? So that humility and that ability to look back so that we don't repeat things is great. And when we think we've got a good redwood in front of us, have a look at your Brené Brown acronym, right? Have a look at whether you've got someone who's willing to do the work with you and has boundaries and reliability and accountability and a vault and integrity and non-judgment and generosity. And then when you're looking at the pace of your relationship, sit down with that person and have those conversations, and have them early and have them often and have them with an open heart.
Yeah.
And see where that takes you. So thank you very much for sharing your time with us. And remember that if you are feeling lonely in the valley today, you are not alone. We are right there with you. So Kiara and I are signing off for today, and we will talk to you soon.